All right, hello everyone, this is Jeff Scott, and I'm going to begin a series of video presentations that I'm doing for the AWD1111 database-driven web development class. And as the saying goes, you got to start somewhere. So I've gone out to this website that's called thevalleyofcode.com, and I did this a couple years ago, but I'm trying to update it, upgrade it, whatever you want to say. These are a series of handbooks that are written by a gentleman named Flavio Copes. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I'm not positive. But I went through here, and he's got 3, 6, 9, 12 handbooks, plus he's working on 11 more. So what I did was I downloaded, and you'll get a copy of this, or you can go down here and download all of them yourselves. But I went out and grabbed the HTML handbook, the CSS handbook, the JavaScript handbook, the React handbook, and the Node.js handbook. Those are the ones that I thought would make the most sense. All right, maybe I'll eventually do the next.js. I don't know. But the point is I've gone in here and grabbed a bunch of these handbooks. So what I'm going to start on right now is I'm going to start going through the Valley of Code HTML handbook. Why? Just as a review, talking about hypertext markup language. Now, there are 74 pages in here. Will I get this done in one taping? I have no clue. When I get done, I'm going to go through the CSS handbook, which is more than twice as large, 100 pages more. Then I'm going to go through the JavaScript handbook, which is a little smaller than the HTML. Then we can jump into the Node handbook, the React handbook. Thought he also, at least he thought he used to have an Express handbook. Maybe I'm wrong. All right. So let's see. He's got, what I'd like to do when these come out is go through his SQL database handbook, his MongoDB handbook, his Express handbook, and his Web Fundamentals handbook. But we'll see how and where that happens. So this is the HTML handbook under the Valley of Code, Flavio Copes. And you'll notice when we start looking through here, he goes, as he says here, by the 80-20 rule, which means that he teaches you well, this is the way he puts it, in 20% of the time you learn 80% of the topic. I always taught with the 80-20 rule, it was the 20% of the stuff that you'll use 80% of the time. Okay? In particular, the goal is to get you up to speed quickly with HTML. Now, other than one or two of you in here, it's probably been a year since you've really gone through and done any HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So for the first couple weeks in the semester, we're going to be reviewing a lot of the stuff that we talked about or that we went over in the first semester. Some of you had me for that class. Some of you may have had Mr. Gudmisted for the class. Doesn't matter. Ideally, at least, we're teaching the same stuff. So I'm not going to read these to you. Some of the stuff we'll go through very, very quickly. Basics, heading, body, etc. And then start going over some of the major tags. Now, again, one thing about this is there's probably going to be things in here or not be things in here where you'll be like, oh, he didn't discuss this. He didn't discuss this. Again, if you want the all-encompassing guides on this stuff, I would go to two different places. I would start by going to w3schools.com and go to their tutorials. And there's their HTML tutorial, their JavaScript tutorial. Somewhere in here is their CSS tutorial. I know it's in here. All right. And, well, there's HTML, there's CSS, there's JavaScript. And as we go on the server side, you'll notice they also have in here, when we look long enough, there's a Node.js. All right. They do have just a generic database tutorial in here. I don't believe they have one on Mongo. All right. So the other one that you want to go to is is the Mozilla Developer Network, which is developer.mozilla.org. Now, I've done a whole series of presentations based on this that you can dig through the internet and find. All right. So you'll notice they've got a JavaScript tutorial, a CSS tutorial, an HTML tutorial, and a web API tutorial in here. So again, I could have gone through this. I could have gone through these. I just decided to go this way. As it says, this book aims to help you quickly learn HTML and get familiar with beginning, intermediate, and some advanced topics. HTML, as you can see right here, is about 30 years old. All right. It says the handbook is aimed at a vast audience. For the beginner, explaining HTML from ground zero, the professional, basically, again, with a lot of you, it's a lot of review. HTML is the foundation of the web. Yeah, I'd still agree with that. And I'd still agree that even as they start talking about things like no code, which is still, in my mind, a misnomer, or a lot of the things that are drag and drop, it still is a good idea. It still is a good idea to be able to understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It says we've got more semantic tags. Presentational HTML is no longer a thing. CSS is taking care of the design of things. I'd agree with that. I think as a review, we're going to build at least one complete website as a class. I don't think the one that I'm planning on building that any of you have built yet, but some of you may. If you have, hey, tune me out when we're going through this. That's fine. HTML success is based on its simplicity. It's also a very forgiving language, if you haven't heard that before. All right. You can inspect the HTML of any web page. We've talked about that kind of thing before. All right. Now, HTML basically is kind of a combination of the WAT-WG and the W3C. The WAT-WG, as you see right here, is the Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group. The W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium. If you've never heard about this, this is the way I look at it. I may not be giving it to you in the exact way, but basically what these governing groups do is they get together, I don't know how often, but they come up with recommendations. In other words, whatever they come up with, they don't order browser manufacturers, say, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. But rather what these groups do is they come up with recommendations that by and large are pretty much followed by virtually every browser manufacturer there is. So back in around the year 2000, all right, as it says here, people believed that the future of the web was going to be XML, the extensible markup language. What's the difference between XML and HTML? Hypertext markup language, HTML, has a series of about 100 to 120 different tags. It's a tag-based language. Some of these tags have been deprecated, which means that you really shouldn't be using them anymore. All right. But then in the early 2000s, people said, you know what? This is just not hacking it. This isn't cutting it. So let's change from HTML to XML, which is the extensible markup language. All right. What was the big thing about XML? With XML, you could create your own tags. All right. And this went on for a few years. It's not that HTML ever died. It's just that it was considered that it was kind of older school and it wasn't going to be used as often. All right. Then, years later, the people who were working with this said, you know what? This really isn't cutting it either. So they decided to go back and upgrade HTML, and that's how we got HTML5. All right. So he is talking about, exactly what's happened in here, and it's not that big a thing. HTML5, as it says right here, now defines a whole set of technologies. It's nothing is all inclusive, but it's meant to be much more inclusive than what was provided in the past. All right, it says that HTML is a living standard like CSS3. It says, yes, we call it HTML5, but HTML4 is from literally 25 years ago. All right. So HTML is served to the browser in different ways. I don't want to read to you, so you can take a quick look at that. I believe, at least, this thing that we're looking at right here is more of the last bullet that you see, where we'll talk about storing our HTML in a file and serving it to the browser by a web server. All right. Some people, and I know Mr. Gudmus did, as far as I know, unless he's changed, still do this. Back in the day, so this was back before the year 2000, when you basically created a file, we were all using the disk operating system, or DOS. And at that time, really the only thing that was supported was a file name extension that had 3 characters in it. Basically every extension had 3 characters. That's why, by convention, HTML, you can save it as either .html or .htm. All right. I use .html. Some people use .htm. It doesn't really matter. But one thing you should start thinking about right now and striving for is to be consistent. HTML, as mentioned there, is a tag-based language. All right. Tags wrap content. Most tags, not all, but most of them, as you see on your screen right now, have a beginning tag and an ending tag. The difference between them is that the ending tag has a slash before it. Now, there are tags, such as the BR tag for line break, the HR tag for horizontal rule, some other tags, like the image tag, that have a beginning tag, but don't have an end tag. All right. So here's an example of an unordered list. And again, I'm not going to go through any of these, at least not right now. When an HTML page is served by the browser, the tags are interpreted, and the browser renders the elements according to the rules that have been defined for this. Some rules are built in. Some rules are set, as it says, by you with your CSS. Now, it's kind of a big thing here, what you see on the top of your screen right now, that over the years, HTML has changed. As it says, it's not presentational. It's not concerned with how things look. That's the CSS part. It's not concerned basically with how things act and interactivity. That's the JavaScript. Rather, it's concerned with what things mean. It's basically its job is to provide the browser content. All right, the page structure says let's start with a proper page. One thing about this is for any HTML that we write from now on, the expectation is going to be that you write it the right way. All right, so the first thing that's in there is our doc type or document type declaration. All right, the one that you use today looks like this, which means that you're using HTML5. All right, after that, you've got your HTML tags. Now, I'm going to just quickly grab this, copy it to the clipboard. Hopefully this will work. I haven't tried it. Yep, it worked good. And I will expect, again, if you were to come in here, let's just keep this real simple. So let's say that you put in a head that had a title in it, my web page. All right, let's just, for now, we're going to keep it real simple. So that's all we have in here. Then we have a body section. We'll just put in a paragraph. My first website, something like that. All right. We end our body tag, and we've ended our HTML tag. Now, if I save this, so I'm just going to go and grab this. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it right to the desktop. and call it our old familiar index.html. All right. Now, I should have brought this up in Visual Studio Code. I didn't. I don't really care. So I'm going to grab that, double click on it, and what do you see here? My first website, good. And you can see the title, my web page. So that's all fine and dandy. All right. And I can right mouse click on here. I can view my page source, and it shows me everything that I've got in there. That's cool. But I do want to show you this. This may be review for you, and that's fine. But with this website that I've just shown you or just created right here, now if I go in and I run the validator, so I'm going to put in here HTML validator, and there it is. It's the markup service. All right, you can do this in different ways, so I may not have done it the way or do it the way Mr. Gudmested did, but I'm going to go by direct input right here. I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab this. Oops. There's all of it. I'm going to paste it in, and I should at least get a warning. All right, so there's everything. When I click check, unless they've changed it, I should get a warning. And it says you really should be adding a language attribute in there. So in other words, good programming practice dictates that we come in here and we say lang equals en, meaning we're using English. I'm going to grab all that again. I'm going to go back out to here, back up. Now I've got it in with the language equals English, check, and you'll notice everything's hunky-dory. Document checking completed, no errors or warnings to show. So the long and short of it is basically I'll expect you to write your HTML in the correct way. So if I ever go back in and validate this, or I validate your CSS, then it comes up cleanly. Why? Just because that's the right way of doing things. All right. So they explain how the tags start like this, and there's the ending one. There are self-closing tags. I already mentioned that to you. All right. Inside the HTML element, we have two elements, the head and the body. You should all remember this. The head is what does not show on the web page itself. Rather, it's information that's either up on top here for your title, or it's used by search engines, all right, or it's something that's not directly visible on the page. Whereas in the body, that is the stuff that is visible on the page. All right, the next section in here, tags versus elements. Let me just check my time here. All right, I'm on 18 minutes. I plan on going somewhere around a half an hour with this. All right, then we'll stop and I'll do another one. Okay, it says I mentioned tags and elements. What's the difference? Okay, it says elements have a starting tag and a closing tag. So an element is the whole package. You know, a lot of this in here, now this is Mr. Cope's, the way he puts things. It's not really that big a thing one way or the other, whether you call it a tag or an element or whatever. Now, I mentioned before that when we take a look over here, and if I come out to W3 Schools, one of the things that I go to all the time is under the W3 Schools tutorial is I go to, and it's in here someplace. Okay, great. All right, what that appears to be is I was in here, one of these was bringing something else up. So let me just come through here and type in this W3 Schools tag list. And there it is. So this, in a nutshell, this tag list here, where is it? Come on, where are you? I don't want list, I want tag list. List, HTML. W3 Schools HTML tags, HTML tag list. There it is. All right. So there it is right here. I don't know how many of these there are. I really should go and count them because I always talk about that. But you'll notice that in this list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So somewhere 10 to 20% of these tags that are in here are red, which means that they've been deprecated, which means that there are newer ways of doing them, and it's recommended that in any new development you don't use those tags. Okay. Tags have attributes. What's an attribute? Well, for instance, I have a height. All right, so if height was the tag, I'm approximately 6 feet, so 72 would be the attribute. All right. So an attribute is information that you can attach to a tag. Some tags have information that automatically, or I shouldn't say automatically, that you just do attach to them. All right, here's a paragraph. We could have done this paragraph without any tags, or I'm sorry, without any attributes. All right, without putting in here a key value thing. Now, on the other hand, when we have something like when we set up a hyperlink, you've got a href equals to tell you where you want it to go. And there's more in here as well. This we'll talk about later, getting into talking about the defer attribute. All right, if you've heard it before, or if you haven't, that's fine. Class and ID, as it says there, are two of the most common that you will find used. IDs are unique on a web page. In other words, they are not meant to be duplicated, where classes are not. They can appear multiple times on a web page. All right. HTML is case insensitive. That said, all right, virtually everyone, as it says, lowercase is the norm. I'll expect you, other than your doc type declaration, which most people will tell you technically is not HTML anyway, but other than your doc type declaration, all right, I'll expect everything to be in lowercase. With a doc type, it's up to you. Remember that HTML, white space is ignored. So in other words, if I come in here, if I were to put this paragraph and set it up like this, let's do that. Let's just grab that, put it into what we've been working with, which is right here. So in fact, let's change this and we'll put that in here, a paragraph of text. But then down below it, I'm going to put in here another paragraph of text, but I'm going to put each word on its own line. Like that. All right, I'm going to save this. I'm going to come back here, run this web page again. It must not have saved. I did not. And you'll notice white space gets eaten up. And anytime you have an enter key in a paragraph or a tag like that, or you have a tab or whatever, it gets replaced with just a single space. Now, you should know this or remember this. Again, it could be review. But if I want to put all this on the same line, and I actually do want some blank spaces, I can use an HTML attribute of a non-breaking space. So I can go in there and add, there's 6 of those. And you'll notice that once I do that, and I come back and take a look at this, again, I did not save. For some reason, my autosave thing is getting screwed up here. All right. Now you'll notice I do have the spaces. Also, you should remember, and again, I realize this is just review, that if I do want each line, each word on its own line, I can put a line break tag, which is one of these self-closing tags. All right, and I can put that in there and then come back in, and now I've got that. All right, again, this should all be just simple review for you. Some people, when they create their paragraphs, like to do it like this. What you'll find with me, just so you're aware of this, if you haven't had me for a class with like this before where we've done some of this stuff, is I'll typically do it like this. That's just cleaner in my opinion. You know, even with the title, I'll usually do this. Oops. I mean, again, do you have to do that? Of course not. To me, it's just an easier read. All I'm asking is when you start doing this stuff, just please be consistent. All right? Normally, my indentation is set for 4 characters, but I think it defaults in Visual Studio Code to 2 characters. Either one's fine. Sorry. All right, your heading. As it says, the head tag contains special tags that define the document properties. It's always written before the body, right after the opening HTML tag. And here's some of the stuff that you can put into it. Before we talk about that, let's jump into Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to do a file open file, and I'm going to grab from my desktop, I'm going to grab that index.html file, and there it is. And I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to totally get rid of everything that's in there. Now, you know that because one of the things that's set up in here is Emmet, that I can hit the exclamation point and the tab key. Why isn't that working? I can hit the exclamation point. Boy, oh boy. Well, let's see. Let's go to extensions. And let's come in here and put in Emmet. Live Emmet JSS. Because it's supposed to be set up in here automatically, and I'm not sure why it's not. But you're supposed to be able to come in here. I know it used to be you could always also type in HTML5. There we go. All right. And you can put in all of this. Well, first of all, let's close this. Okay. Then let's put this over, some of this at least, over multiple lines so that you can see what's going on here. Okay. So what do we have here? I want to talk right now about these lines of text. And this is my interpretation of it. You may or may not agree. And if you don't, it's totally fine. This first line right here says that we are using the Unicode character set. UTF actually means something. It's like Universal Transformation Format or something like that. I don't care. But it's the character set. Remember, the only thing that the computer can understand are zeros and ones. All right. So we're telling it that rather than using the ASCII character set, the American Standards Coding for Information Interchange, which was what was in vogue when I was your age, all right, we're using Unicode. What's the difference? ASCII only supports 255 or 256 characters. Unicode supports hundreds of thousands, if not more, characters. So it does not just English, but other languages. All right. This, I'd have to look it up, but I remember there was some kind of a thing in here that basically said if you were using Internet Explorer and, earlier versions of an Internet Explorer, to treat it like you were using Edge. All right. This in here, basically it's being used to try to make your web page responsive. All right. So the viewport is whatever you're using to take a look at your web page on. You're telling it to use the entire device width and use 100% of it. Now, is there more to that? Probably. There are other meta tags that you can put in here as well. Most of the other meta tags that you would put in here are used for search engine optimization. All right, there's an author tag, and there's a description tag, and there are other ones. We're just going to leave it right here. Okay. All right, so what's explained in here next is the title tag. As it says, it's the page title. Well, that may not even be in here anymore, but we'll take a quick look. So there is, yeah, there's the title, and it just says document. So again, that's what appears up here on the top of the screen. It'll just say document in this case. The script tag, as it says, is used to add JavaScript onto a page. All right. So you can do it two ways. So you can do it like this. So let's suppose for a second that I had a JavaScript file. Again, that's brand new, so I don't need this one anymore. So let me get back to here. All right. I can come in here and put in this. All right. Which says that I'm using this. We're going to worry about prettying it up and stuff later. The point is this. We're going to always be saying this. For years, there was a big squabble among enthusiasts and people, practitioners of HTML and JavaScript. Where should you put the script tag? Many people felt it should come down here right before your ending body tag because you want to make sure that the head is completely loaded before the body might try to take advantage of or utilize something that's in this file. Well, that has changed over time, and by putting the word defer in there, you can now put this right in the head section because it tells it to defer loading this basically until everything has been loaded. All right, and again, I'm generalizing here. All right. And again, they'll talk about all that in here. I'm giving you my take on it. So it says in modern JavaScript, we have an alternative that is more performant, the defer attribute. All right. It says it triggers the faster path to a loading page and fast loading JavaScript. It says, note the async is similar, but in my opinion, a worse option. And if you want, you can go take a look. This is right here. I believe this is in his blog. All right. Let's finish this up, and then we'll take a break. And we'll continue on in a bit. The no script tag, if someone has disabled JavaScript on their browser. So you can go in when you're working in here. You can actually go in. I guess it'd be easier to do it from here. Get rid of this. You can go into here and go in through your settings. All right. And you can, I don't remember how to do it right now, but you can disable JavaScript. All right. And especially when you're testing, there may be a reason to do this. Okay. So it says you can choose to disable JavaScript scripts in your browser settings, or the browser might not support them by default. That'd be very rare today. All right. The no script tag can only contain other tags. Typically what you would put in there is if you had a no script, you might put a message in there that says, hey, you've got JavaScript turned off or it's not supported. You might want to add it. All right. So here's the link tag. This should be all review. As it says, it's used to set up relationships between an HTML document typically and something else. So here's the kind of thing that we're going to be doing. Now with that script tag you saw in this, again, I want you to write your stuff correctly from the get-go. So what we are going to end up doing is like our index.html for virtually everything we work on. We're going to come in here. So let's just say this is called test. I'm just making this up. And I open this. So in here, I'm just going to copy this in because it's already open. But we're going to come in and we're going to have a folder called CSS. And in there, we'll have a file such as styles.css. All right. And then we will also have another folder that's called JS. Oops, I'll have to fix that. And in our JS folder, not JHS, but in our JS folder, we'll have a file, for example, scripts.js. All right. And we will have like another folder probably called something like images, where we put our images. The reason I'm telling you that is that when we come in here and we're actually putting in this stuff, this is not going to look like this. Ours is going to look like JS slash, and it'll have scripts.js. All right. And then when we put in our link tag, we'll have link rel equals style sheet. All right, href equals, and it'll be like css slash styles.css. All right, my IntelliSense isn't picking this up, so but we're using the other one. So let's do a file, save as, and let me throw it into test here. Yes, I want to replace it. There we go. All right, so that's the way that we're going to be setting things up. Why? Because it's the right way to set things up. All right, we may as well do things correctly. Here's some media stuff. So for instance, if we had two different style sheets, one to handle online on screen and one to handle print, we could put that in there. And there's a lot of other stuff. Here's some favicon stuff. I'm not going to get into any of that right now. All right. So this seems like a good place to stop right here. I'm about almost a third of the way through this. So I'm going to stop here, and I'll pick it up in the next lecture in just a few minutes.